Hello and welcome to today's webcast on building the right foundation, modern data platform for AI applications, brought to you by Insight and Microsoft. Below this webcast, you will see an attachments tab where you can navigate to after this webinar. There you can find additional information on assets on today's topic. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speaker, Carm Taglianti, Insight's Chief Data Officer. Carm, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carter, and thank you everyone for attending today. So as Carter mentioned, we want to talk about modern data platform for AI applications with Insight and Microsoft. So you guys, just a quick overview of who I am. So I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I focus on cloud computing, data science, and just about everything you can imagine related to data. AI, though, is my passion, so I love to work in the space today. And in addition to working in the space, I also teach it. So I teach at Northeast University, I do some work at MIT and a number of other places. So it's really kind of a very interesting time for us to be in, and I love to talk about this topic area. So Insight, from a consulting perspective, we get involved in a lot of the basic capabilities that you would need in order to be able to deliver the kinds of solutions that we'll be talking about today. So as it relates to AI-enabled applications and the data platforms that are supporting it, this is a core competency of ours, an area where we like to focus. Because if you think about it, AI is really mostly about the data, and that's why I wanted to focus on this topic today. So in general, in order to be able to create these kinds of solutions, you have to have capabilities in a number of different areas. And it's not just capabilities, but it's also figuring out a way to tie them all together for the benefit of the organization. So when I talk about AI-enabled applications, I really think about analytics maturity. And analytics maturity is based off of the modern data platform you see here down on the right. So in essence, we just think about it from the perspective of where's my data? Is my data sufficient or able to support the analytics needs that I might have, whether it's AI, BI, or just ML? And ML I refer to as sort of classical AI. But we also have to think about things like, are we governing our data? How are we managing the services or access to that data? So there's a number of different things that we can think about as it relates to the maturity model of the modern data platform that underlies everything that we do. And then on top of that, in order to create AI-enabled applications, well, integrating those capabilities into our applications is a critical part of that. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but this year, 2024, has become really the year of actionable AI. So how do we take AI and embed it into our applications? And probably, excuse me, one of the most prolific examples that we know of today is Copilot for Office 365. So basically, Copilot built directly into your Office platform that allows you to be able to take advantage of your organization's data to enable productivity for your workforce. And so that's really just an example of an AI-enabled application. And so a lot of what I like to talk about are how do we create custom applications that can run anywhere? And this kind of a stack architecture, and again, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but it really just helps you to understand what are the different areas that we think about as it relates to creating this kind of an experience. So AI-enabled applications is an experience for your end user, but it has to run somewhere. So it either runs in the cloud or it runs in a private instance in your local data center, or a combination of the two. But in order to do that, there are many features that need to be made available. You need frameworks as part of the AI platform. You need to create an AI development stack, which allows you to be able to sort of formulate the AI that you might be using or the ML that you're using for performing the analytics that you might be using. And then, of course, the application at the top of the stack here, which is how do I create user experience, web interfaces, or how do I interact with my user? And it doesn't just have to be text, for example, that we've grown accustomed to with ChatGPT, but it could be visual, speech to text. There's other kinds of interface modalities that we can think about. So data management is an important part of this, which is sort of this big block to the right. And then the application framework. And of course, everything needs to be secure, especially as it relates to accessing data that may be sensitive or have IP. So in that context, we really want to talk about why do we need to think about data state modernization or even maturity on the data state side. So in order for us to be able to take advantage of the analytics that we want to provide to our end users, we really need to think about this from the perspective of what is the data that we have, and is that data sufficient for those analytics? So typically it would require either taking advantage of the more modern technologies. If you haven't updated your environment in the last 20 years from a data perspective, well, then you might need to think about what are some of the new capabilities that are available today. Things like standard data lake concepts, or scalable databases, or even NoSQL databases. Those might be things that you might want to think about in terms of modernization. But if you've already been modernized, then we also want to think about what are some of the new capabilities that are related to things like data fabric and the ability to access data anywhere where it might exist or live. So there are a number of different things that we will talk about that are related to understanding how to sort of keep up with the state of change as it relates to not just AI and analytics, but also the data that supports it. So these are going to be really important concepts as we think about the maturity model, and also how we take care of our data to make sure that we're getting the most benefit out of those data assets. So why does it matter? So there are a number of reasons for us to think about it. So we'll call it a modern data warehouse or a modern data platform for the sake of argument here. But we do have to deal with increasing data volumes. Data is changing all the time. We used to talk about big data. We don't necessarily talk about big data so much anymore, but in general, we have the same problem and phenomenon. Data continues to be created. We have new points of presence that create new data. Data comes in real time. The half-life of data may grow or shrink depending on your use case or application. But you have to think about data lifecycle as well. So where do you put the data? How do you curate it? How do you define its lifecycle? How do you manage it? And then also, how do you secure it? What data should be kept private or for the use only for specific purposes or users? And you want to make sure that you can control that as well. And there are new deployment models as we think about, how are we distributing our data, or are we storing it in object form? Are we storing it in sort of classical relational form? Are we storing it in NoSQL? Or I guess it's kind of that object form is the same, but even a NoSQL environment is going to be, some degree of structure, even though it may be key value store. It allows us to be able to store data in whatever way that's most convenient for us to be able to keep track of, what are the requirements for that data. So frequent updated, or is it going to be used for massive aggregation? Or maybe it is changing structure. So changing structure is another thing that we have to accommodate for. So relational databases don't solve all problems anymore. We have to think about that as well. And of course, we want to use these things for advanced analytics, machine learning, which is really the key. And, sort of the onslaught of I'll call it the new generation of AI is sort of forced us to put a lens on this. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the data assets that we already have, and then the processes that we have, and then extending them to include, I'll call it mechanical sympathy, or new technologies that allow us to be able to do a better job. So we really sort of move from this legacy concept to modern to innovative, and we want to make sure that we are able to support the demands of the business. And that's really what it's all about. It's not just about collecting data and putting it into a lakehouse. It's also figuring out how are you going to leverage that data in order to be able to drive your business forward, whether it's operational efficiencies or competitive advantage. So we start with the modern data warehouse. And in this case, we, as an organization, we like to help customers by creating accelerators, or acceleration that allows you to be able to use a product we like to call Insight Lens. But basically, it helps you to understand how to create a modern data warehouse and do it fast. And so a lot of the processes for data acquisition, data transformation, and then data storage or propagation into the format that you want to use for analytics purposes allows you to be able to do that quickly. So Lens is that product which helps you to accelerate. And we use a consulting or a workshop-based model to be able to work with you to understand what is it that your objective is, where's the data live, what kinds of things need to be done to that data in order to get you to this point. So in addition to the Lens accelerators that I talked about, which are related to how we create a quick, environment to allow us to be able to store our data, we also have other accelerators that allow you to be able to enable AI, BI, or the analytics process. Really, the target for us is to understand how we can drive ROI. And this should be really important for you to think about. So if we look at some of the key characteristics of this, the modern data platform is key, as I mentioned, but we want to drive what the real business outcome would be through business intelligence and artificial intelligence capabilities. It runs on cloud infrastructure, of course, the Microsoft platform. We're using the Microsoft product suite in order to allow us to be able to do this, things like Fabric, which allow us to be able to manage our environment. And then we're going to use Gen AI, for example, or Power BI to be able to do the business intelligence. And so we're wrapping accelerators around this to be able to do this quickly. So I already talked about the Insight Lens for the modern data warehouse or modern data platform, the accelerator. Then there's also an accelerator that allows us to be able to look at ML or AI. And we call this Lens for ML AI accelerator, or Lens for Gen AI is another term that we use for this particular accelerator. And then for organizations that are looking to create centers of excellence around things like AI, data governance, understanding the governance model, being able to understand how to use AI to the benefit of their organization, we provide those kinds of services around AI as well as data. And so all of those things tie together that allows you to be able to maximize the benefit of your data. So it's not just a matter of collecting data and understanding where it exists and creating services around it, but it's also how to put it to good use and to drive outcome within your organization. And so in this particular case, so for example, we could just look at a variety of data coming from different locations, collecting that data. We want to rapidly centralize that data and then curate that data so that we can use it for these analytics processes. So things like improving cross-sell, for example. So using the accelerators or these capabilities, which are very programmatically driven, that we can do this quickly. So we can identify the data sources, we can leverage the underlying capabilities, the Microsoft platform, and we can then base the target environment or the representation of that data structure can align to the business problem we're trying to solve. And then it's really kind of easy for us to then, create a Power BI report on top of it, or to use that to drive our AI ML capabilities as part of it. Even things like, Gen AI can be used to provide intelligence. These environments can provide intelligence to us to help us to do things like write sales documentation, for example. So we can use a combination of the data acquisition tools and data creation that allows us to be able to drive the AI processes forward. So that's pretty interesting in terms of how this all sort of ties together. And as I said before, at the end of the day, it's all about the data. So what we're trying to really focus on is driving intelligence value. So here it's like transforming data into actionable insights and results. And a lot of it really has to do with collecting all of those data assets, using those techniques that I just described a few minutes ago, no matter what form they might be in, and then really applying a level of consolidation, coordination, correlation, and transformation during the intelligence process, and then being able to then use that data, whether it's in an application, whether it's on the, using it on the edge or an edge-based application or platform, creating alerts, chatbots, for example, a good example for today, automation reports, et cetera. So that data now drives our business processes in the future. And that's really what we want to focus on. So if we look at accelerating this intelligence evolution, part of the way that we'd like to start is to really just look at it from the perspective of understanding what it is you're looking to achieve. So discovery involves unlocking new opportunities with comprehensive analytics. What are the kinds of things that you want to do? So a lot of my customers come to me and ask me, well, does this mean now if I want to start thinking about analytics, do I have to collect all my data and put it in one spot and spend a year making sure that we can clean up all that data so that we can use it? Well, no, it's not about that. So it's really about sort of creating these iterative processes that allow you to collect the data that you require to use the service infrastructure of tools like Fabric to be able to then say, I can do this incrementally. I can create incremental capabilities. I can use the Lens for MDP or Lens for MDW accelerator to be able to create subject area data warehouses or data lakes that allow me to drive my intelligence capability forward. Then enablement really has to do more with how do I sort of take that data once I've collected it and then turn it into actionable results that can be consumed by business teams. So making better decisions and then trusting those decisions. So trusting decisions really is a result of trusting your data at the end of the day. And then automation, of course, so for things where we want to then say we trust the process, we validated it, and we verified it. Now we're going to let the machine help us to make decisions. We can look at automation techniques, which allow us to be able to then move on and think about solving more complex problems. And that's really what this is all about. So a lot of times people ask me, well, does Gen AI, does it mean we're going to all lose our jobs? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that we'll be freed up to be able to do other things. And so think of it as, productivity enhancement and automation capabilities allow us to be able to get there faster. And we use then these standardized processes to allow us to do things in a more effective way. So the way that we think about the roadmap for success is, we really go through this process of working with you to strategize. So understand what are your key opportunities, envision. So look at areas where you can focus and then start to do the exploration with you. Launching a fast start, for example. This is where the accelerators come into play. This allows you to be able to then spin up these accelerators quickly to see the actual proof of concept or viability easily and quickly and start to factor in the return on investment. Then to accelerate is to move this more into the enterprise or scale, as I like to call it. So you start to move more toward this repeatable foundation that allows you to be able to say, hey, we were able to realize the benefit we talked about. Now we can move forward. And then finally, management stages where you can manage the environment. So making sure that you are focusing on things that are really important, especially at scale, related to security, compliance, but also operational efficiency. And that's really what you want to get at in the manage phase. Okay, so some examples. So where have we done this before? So things like product quality, for example. Again, AI, yes. And here we're looking at how do you improve quality and reduce scrap that might occur in a manufacturing process. But fundamentally, this is really about the collection of data. So understanding what it is that you're looking to accomplish as a business. And in this particular case, they wanted to improve quality and reduce scrap. So there you go. That's the business problem. So we first then had to determine what data would we need in order to be able to determine that. How do you measure, improvement, for example? And so in this particular case, we were looking at I'll just take the example of reduction of scrap. So we can measure how much scrap do we currently have when we're going through the manufacturing cycle. Now we can determine whether or not we were able to reduce that. Pretty easy calculation then at that point. But you don't get to that easy calculation until you have the ability to understand exactly what the outcome needs to be. So that's one example. Another one is a product recommender. So it's basically increasing, in this particular case, product attach, increasing the performance or improvement in product attach for a global component manufacturer or retailer that wanted to improve sales of related components. So basically it helps with recommendations. So this could be an example where, say, parts don't exist or alternative parts might suffice in particular use case situations, but what those parts are is maybe buried someplace in documentation. So product recommenders allow us to be able to do that. Well, the only way that we know how to do that is to basically collect that data, formulate the data so that it can drive the AI that creates the product recommendation engine. Okay, so that's really just a training process overall. So at the end of the day, it's really about the data, of course. And of course, I would say that being the chief data officer, but yes, it's the modern data platform. It's making sure that we understand what data we have, understanding how much we can trust the data for decision-making processes, and then applying the right kinds of algorithms that allow us to be able to take value from that data. So it's really about value creation, which is really sort of the data collection, data management, and then value realization, applying the algorithms and then using it to drive decisions within the organization. And I talk a lot about AI, but BI is really just, sort of, I'll call it the more classical way of thinking about understanding how we can, use reporting to be able to visualize our data assets and to drive similar kinds of behavior, just not algorithmically. This is really more visually, and that's how we typically think about business intelligence, and it's a little bit more statistical in its nature. Of course, everything running on top of a cloud-based infrastructure in the case of Azure, and that's really how we think about hitting the easy button, if you will, to allow us to take advantage of the products and services that Microsoft provides to be able to do this quickly and effectively. So we can drive to outcome really quickly. And if you're interested in taking the next step in your journey, feel free to reach out, scan the QR code. Love to hear from you and talk about what your journey might be as it relates to the modern data platform. And I'll call it the driving decisions directly from the data that you have and the data assets that you are collecting and managing within your enterprise.